Michael Chen had owned Duke for 7 years, which meant Duke had been part of his adult life during some of its most important transitions. Michael had brought Duke home as an 8-week-old puppy the week after he and Jennifer got married. He'd brought Duke to the hospital when Sophie was born. He'd watched Duke age alongside his children, becoming less of a pet and more of a family member, the constant presence in their home, the one who was always happy to see everyone, the one who asked for nothing but attention and the occasional treat. Duke was not an exceptional dog in terms of training or intelligence. He couldn't perform impressive tricks. He'd never won any dog show competitions. He was just a standard golden retriever, friendly, loyal, food-motivated, prone to getting into the garbage and knocking things off counters with his tail. But he was theirs, and that made him exceptional in the way that family members are exceptional. Not because of what they could do, but because of what they meant. Michael worked as a structural engineer, which meant he spent most of his days in an office looking at blueprints and calculations. It was steady work, good work, important work. But it was also isolating in its own way, sitting in a cubicle, staring at screens, the world outside becoming abstract and theoretical. Duke grounded him. Every evening when Michael came home from work, the dog would be waiting at the door with that particular intensity of joy that only dogs could express. Michael would come through the door, and Duke would be there, tail wagging so hard his entire back end would wiggle, his whole body vibrating with excitement that his favorite person had finally come home. Those moments were sacred to Michael in a way he'd never quite articulated to anyone. In a world of abstract calculations and theoretical problems, Duke was concrete. Duke was real. Duke was proof that he mattered, that at least one being on this planet was genuinely happy to see him. Jennifer understood this. She'd watched Michael's relationship with Duke over the years and had come to see the dog as something vital to her husband's emotional health. When Michael was stressed about work, Duke would lay his head on Michael's lap. When Michael was anxious about money or health or the general chaos of raising children, Duke's presence, steady, uncomplicated, accepting, would provide a kind of anchor. Sophie, their older child at 11 years old, had grown up with Duke as her constant companion. She'd learned to read before she learned to read people, she often joked, because she'd spent so many afternoons reading to Duke while the dog dozed beside her. There was a particular bond between Sophie and Duke that came from years of quiet companionship. They didn't need to be doing anything special. Sometimes Sophie would just sit in Duke's bed with him, her back against his warm body, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Marcus, at 9 years old, had a different relationship with Duke. He was more active, more energetic, and Duke seemed to understand that Marcus needed not just companionship, but engagement. They would play fetch in the backyard. Duke would chase Marcus around the house in games that inevitably ended with someone, usually Michael, yelling at them to be more careful about the furniture. But even in those moments of boisterous play, there was an underlying tenderness. Duke would let Marcus hug him around the neck, would tolerate being dressed in Sophie's old hats, would lay still while Marcus practiced his reading skills by reading picture books aloud to the dog. Their home in Visalia was nothing fancy, a 1970s ranch-style house with a large backyard, perfect for a dog. It was the kind of neighborhood where people knew their neighbors and looked out for each other. It was the kind of place where you could imagine raising children and growing old. Michael had bought the house with a 15-year mortgage when he was 35 years old. He'd done the calculations, how long they'd live there, how the property would appreciate, how they'd be paying it off by the time they were ready to retire. It was the kind of calculation that gave him comfort, the idea that the future was predictable, that if you planned carefully enough, you could insure yourself against uncertainty. The fire, when it came, would make a mockery of those calculations. August in California is hot. Not the pleasant heat of spring or early summer, but a brutal, unforgiving heat that makes you understand why people move away from the state. August is fire season, and everyone living in the foothills knew it. The Chen family had lived through fire season for 7 years. They'd prepared. They had a go-bag packed with important documents. They had an evacuation plan. Michael had even invested in a fire extinguisher and had taken a community safety course about what to do if fire came to their neighborhood. Preparedness, Michael had learned, was comforting. It was also useless. The fire started in the mountains above their neighborhood on August 14th. It started small, a few hundred acres, nothing to worry about yet. But fires in California don't stay small. They spread, they grow, they consume. The next day, August 15th, the fire had grown to 2,000 acres. The next day, 3,000. The news reported it in the casual way they reported natural disasters. A live reporter standing in front of smoke and flames, explaining wind patterns and terrain, and the efforts of firefighters, while the camera panned across the mountains that were slowly turning into an inferno. Michael watched the news and calculated distances. The fire was still 15 miles away. Plenty of time. No need to panic. By evening, the authorities had issued an evacuation warning for their neighborhood. Not yet mandatory, just a warning. Have your bags ready? Be prepared to leave quickly if conditions worsen. Jennifer had called Michael at work and asked what they should do. Michael had said they should pack the go-bags and be ready, but that there was no reason to evacuate yet. The fire was still 15 miles away. They'd probably be fine. That night, Michael sat on the back patio with Duke and watched the sky. The smoke from the fire was high enough that even 20 miles away you could see it. The entire western sky was tinged orange, like someone had painted the sunset in shades of disaster. "We're going to be okay," Michael told Duke, more to reassure himself than the dog. "The firefighters will contain it. These things happen every year in California. We've talked about it being a possibility, and we're prepared. We're going to be fine." Duke rested his head on Michael's knee and looked up at him with those soft brown eyes. The dog didn't understand words, but he understood tone. He understood that Michael was anxious, and Duke's response was to be more present, to push himself closer to his person, to offer silent support. By morning, the evacuation warning had been upgraded to a mandatory evacuation order. The fire had jumped containment lines. The wind had shifted, pushing the flames toward populated areas. The authorities estimated the fire would reach the residential neighborhoods by afternoon. Michael woke Jennifer at 6 in the morning. "We need to go now," he said. "I don't want to be stuck in traffic when the evacuation happens." They woke the kids. Sophie and Marcus were groggy with sleep, confused about why they were being roused so early. Jennifer explained that they were going to go stay with Aunt Rachel in Fresno for a few days while the firefighters dealt with the fire. "Is our house going to burn down?" Marcus asked, the question small and terrified. "No," Michael said immediately, with a confidence he didn't feel. "Our house is going to be fine. The fire probably won't even come near us. This is just a precaution." But even as he said it, he was moving through the house, grabbing the go-bags they'd prepared. He was taking photographs of the living room, the kitchen, the bedrooms. Insurance documentation, just in case. He was unplugging electronics, closing interior doors to slow the spread of fire if the worst happened. All the things they'd talked about doing in a fire emergency, all the things that would prove to be insufficient. The drive to get Duke's carrier from the garage should have taken 2 minutes. The garage was just 20 feet from the house. But when Michael stepped outside, the smoke was so thick he could barely see the driveway. The air was hot and acrid, filling his lungs with something that wasn't quite air. The sky had transformed from morning light to a dim, apocalyptic twilight. "Michael!" Jennifer was calling from inside the house. "We need to go now!" He grabbed Duke's carrier from the garage and brought it to the car. He was planning to put Duke in the carrier, to secure the dogs safely in the back seat, to load them all up and drive south to Fresno where it was safe. But Duke, who had never been particularly reactive to noises or situations, seemed to understand that something was very wrong. The smoke, the heat, the unnatural quality of the light, the anxiety in Michael's voice and movements. When Michael tried to put the leash on Duke to guide him to the car, the dog bolted. It happened in seconds. Michael had the leash in his hand. The carrier was open. He was calling Duke to come. But the dog's instinct in that moment was not to follow his person to safety. It was to run. Away from the smoke, away from the heat, away from the thing that was wrong. "Duke!" Michael shouted, but the dog was already gone, bolting past him, disappearing into the smoke-filled street. Michael ran after him, calling his name, but Duke didn't come back. The dog ran north, away from the main evacuation route, into the smoke and chaos. "Michael!" Jennifer was screaming from inside the house. "We have to go now!" Michael stood in the street for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 seconds, trying to decide between his wife and children inside the house and his dog vanishing into the smoke. He made the only choice he could make. He ran back to the house. "Duke's gone," he said, breathless. He ran. "I tried to catch him, but he bolted." Jennifer's face crumpled, but she grabbed his arm. "We have to go. We have to get the kids out." Sophie and Marcus were in the car, terrified and confused. Michael and Jennifer climbed in. Michael looked back at the house one more time. The brick structure he'd paid for over 15 years, the place where they'd built their life, and then he pulled out of the driveway. The drive to the evacuation center took 45 minutes. It should have taken 15, but the roads were clogged with people trying to escape the fire. Every street was packed with cars, all moving slowly, all driven by people trying to get their families to safety. Michael's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. He couldn't stop thinking about Duke. Where had the dog gone? Had he run toward the fire or away from it? Was Duke scared? Was he trying to find his way home, or was he just panicking? In the back seat, Marcus was crying quietly. Sophie was staring out the window at the smoke, processing what was happening. Jennifer sat in the front passenger seat, her hand on Michael's knee, trying to ground him even as she was terrified herself. When they finally reached the evacuation center, a high school gymnasium that had been converted into a shelter, Michael walked into the chaos of hundreds of people trying to figure out what to do. Some were crying, some were on their phones, some were sitting in stunned silence, processing the loss of their homes even before they knew if they'd lost them. A Red Cross volunteer directed them to a section of the gym where they could set up. Michael set down the go bag, the empty dog carrier still in his hands. He stood there, holding the carrier, feeling the enormity of its emptiness. Jennifer put her arm around him. "We'll find him," she said. "When this is over, we'll find him." But Michael could see the doubt in her eyes. They both knew the statistics. Pets lost in fires had low survival rates. Dogs panicked in fires. They ran toward the flames instead of away from them. Duke was probably dead already, probably caught in the fire, probably... Michael couldn't finish the thought. The fire burned for 6 days. Michael watched the news obsessively, tracking the fire's progress, trying to figure out if their neighborhood was still standing or if it was gone. The reporting was sparse and slow. First, the fire was 2 miles away, then it was in the neighborhood, then it was past the neighborhood. On the 3rd day of the evacuation, they got the news. Their house was destroyed. A neighbor who'd stayed later than they should have had driven by and reported it to Michael. The house was gone, completely gone. Nothing but foundation and rubble. Michael felt the news like a physical blow, not because of the house. Houses could be rebuilt, but because it meant that Duke, if the dog had gone home, if the dog had tried to find shelter in the familiar place, would have found nothing, would have found only fire and destruction. Jennifer held him while he cried. Sophie and Marcus didn't really understand yet what losing the house meant. To them, it was abstract. To Michael, it was the end of something. A life, a routine, a place where his dog had lived. Sophie started working on missing dog posters. She drew Duke in colored pencil with impressive detail. His characteristic dopey smile, his golden coat rendered in various shades of yellow and brown. Below the drawing, she wrote, "Please help us find Duke. He's our best friend and he's scared." They posted the flyers at the evacuation center, at nearby animal shelters, at veterinary clinics. They created a Facebook page for lost fire victims' pets. They called animal shelters in a 50-mile radius. Nothing. The fire was contained on the 6th day. It had consumed 3,000 acres, destroyed dozens of homes, and displaced hundreds of people. The authorities issued a statement that the fire was 100% contained by August 21st. People were allowed to return to their neighborhoods to assess damage. Michael drove back alone to see the house. He needed to see it without the kids there, without having to put on a brave face. He needed to understand what had happened. The neighborhood was unrecognizable. The street signs were still there, but the houses were gone. Completely gone. There was his street, but instead of homes with yards and gardens, there was a landscape of destruction. Foundations, chimneys standing alone, cars burned down to their frames. Trees that had been green a week ago were now charred black skeletons. He found his lot by memory and the address marker. The house was gone. The brick chimney still stood, incongruous against the destruction. The foundation was there. And scattered around the lot was debris, pieces of their life, now unidentifiable ash and twisted metal. Michael got out of the car and walked through the rubble. He found pieces of things, a section of cabinet door, a hinge from a window frame, something that might have been part of a picture frame. He found Duke's dog bed, or what was left of it, a burned, twisted mass of what used to be cushioning. He stood there for a long time, just looking at the destruction. Then he got back in the car and drove to the animal shelters to check on any dogs that had been brought in. There was no Duke. Over the next month, Michael became a man obsessed with finding his dog. He called animal shelters 3 times a day. He drove to shelters throughout the region, looking at every golden retriever that came in. He posted on social media constantly. He created a detailed lost pet flyer with Duke's microchip number and specific identifying marks. A small scar on his left ear, a distinctive pattern in his coat. He started a website dedicated to finding Duke. He posted updates, shared photos, begged for information. Jennifer watched her husband pour his grief into the search and understood what was happening. Michael wasn't just trying to find Duke. He was trying to regain some control over a situation that had spun completely out of control. The fire had taken his house, disrupted his family's life, forced them to rely on the charity of others. Finding Duke would be something. It would be proof that not everything had been lost. But as the weeks passed with no solid leads, Michael had to accept what seemed increasingly likely. Duke was dead. The dog had bolted into the fire. The fire had consumed the neighborhood. The odds of Duke surviving were infinitesimally small. By late September, nearly 6 weeks after the evacuation, Michael and Jennifer had begun to accept the loss. They'd spent a weekend cleaning up the lot, salvaging what little they could, meeting with contractors about rebuilding. They'd started the insurance claim process. They'd begun the slow work of moving forward. Sophie had mostly stopped posting about Duke on social media, though she still checked the Lost Pets page occasionally. Marcus had started back at school, and while he'd told his friends his dog was lost in the fire, he was starting to process it the way 9-year-olds did, talking about it less, thinking about it differently, beginning to move forward. Michael stopped checking the animal shelters every day. He stopped calling rescue organizations. He allowed himself to accept that Duke was gone. It was one of the hardest things he'd had to do. On October 14th, nearly 2 months after the evacuation, Michael received a call while he was at work. The caller ID showed a number from Ridgecrest, California, a town 90 miles north of Visalia in the Mojave Desert region. "Is this Michael Chen?" A woman's voice, professional, calm. "Yes," Michael said, confused. "Who is this?" "This is Carla Rodriguez from the Ridgecrest Animal Shelter. I'm calling because we have a dog that was brought to us 2 days ago. The dog is microchipped, and when we scanned it, your information came up. We wanted to verify that this is your dog before we proceed with any placement." Michael's heart stopped. "You have Duke. We have a golden retriever that matches the description from the posts about your dog. He's in rough shape. He's been through significant trauma, but he's alive. Can you come verify?" Michael was already standing up, already grabbing his keys. I'm on my way. How long does it take to get to Ridgecrest? About an hour and a half from Visalia. Michael was in his car before he finished the conversation. He called Jennifer and told her to keep the kids home from school, that he'd explain when he got back. He called his work and told them he was having a family emergency and would not be in. The drive to Ridgecrest was the longest drive of Michael's life. He kept thinking this had to be a mistake. It couldn't actually be Duke. The odds were impossible. But he also kept thinking about his dog. What if it was Duke? What if, somehow impossibly, his dog had survived and been found? The animal shelter was a modest facility in the middle of the desert town. Carla, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the particular competence of someone who'd worked with animals her whole life, met him in the parking lot. "Before we go in, I want to prepare you," Carla said. "This dog has been through something significant. He's malnourished, dehydrated. He has injuries to his paws. He's clearly been traveling for a long distance, and he's been through trauma. He's physically here, but emotionally, he's going to need work." Michael nodded, not trusting himself to speak. When they walked into the holding area, Michael saw the dog immediately. It was Duke, but Duke like a ghost of himself. The golden coat was matted and singed. The dog was skeletal, his ribs and hip bones visible under skin pulled tight. His front paws were wrapped in bandages, and even from a distance Michael could see they were raw and damaged. But it was Duke, the shape of his head, the particular way his ears hung, the golden hue of his coat. It was unmistakably their dog. Duke lifted his head when he saw Michael, and his tail moved weakly. Michael knelt down, moving slowly so as not to startle the injured dog. "Oh, buddy," he whispered. "Oh, buddy, where did you go? How did you find your way back?" Duke limped toward him, and Michael felt tears streaming down his face as he held his dog carefully, mindful of the injuries, just breathing in the familiar scent of Duke, even underneath the smoke and dirt and trauma. "How is this possible?" Michael asked, looking up at Carla. "Ridgecrest is 90 miles from Visalia. How did he get here?" "I don't know exactly," Carla said. "We have reports from various people along Highway 395 who reported seeing a dog matching his description over the past 6 weeks. It looks like he's been traveling north, covering ground slowly. We think he's been scavenging for food and water, probably traveling mostly at night when it's cooler. We have reports from someone in Tehachapi who said they saw a thin golden dog going through their trash about 2 weeks ago. Someone else reported seeing him near Mojave. By the time he got here to Ridgecrest, he was in this condition. He walked 90 miles? Michael couldn't process it. On paws that were damaged from the fire? "It seems that way," Carla said. "We've kept him for 2 days while we tried to contact you. We've done basic care. He's had water, some food, antibiotics to prevent infection, but he needs to see a veterinarian. And more importantly, he needs to be home." The veterinarian who examined Duke was Dr. Patel, a woman in her 50s who specialized in emergency care and had treated many animals displaced by fires that season. She spent an hour examining Duke, running blood work, taking x-rays, looking at every wound with careful attention. "The good news," Dr. Patel said, pulling up the x-ray images on her computer, "is that there's no internal damage. His organs are functioning. His heart is strong. His lungs are clear. He didn't have significant inhalation injury from the fire." "Ooh, and the bad news?" Michael asked, though he could see the injuries clearly enough without being told. "The paws are the main concern. He has stress fractures in several bones. See here?" She pointed at the x-ray. 2 of his toe bones are fractured, probably from the repeated impact of walking on damaged tissue. The paw pads are severely abraded. The skin is worn away, exposing raw tissue underneath. If these wounds become infected, he could develop sepsis, which would be life-threatening. "How long will they take to heal?" Michael asked. "Several months, probably. We're going to start him on antibiotics immediately to prevent infection. I'm also going to recommend pain management. He's probably been in significant pain this whole time he's been traveling. We'll need to keep him quiet during recovery. No running, no heavy play. And we'll need to monitor the wounds closely for signs of infection." Will he make a full recovery? Michael asked. Physically? I believe so. His body is strong, and he's demonstrated remarkable resilience already. Emotionally is another question. He's been through significant trauma. He may have anxiety issues, particularly around loud noises or the smell of smoke. He may have behavioral changes. Recovery from trauma isn't always linear or predictable. Michael nodded, understanding. He wasn't just getting his dog back. He was getting back a dog that had been broken by the fire and had carried that brokenness across 90 miles of desert. Jennifer and the kids were waiting in the driveway when Michael pulled up with Duke. Sophie and Marcus ran outside, but Michael stopped them before they reached the car. Gently, he said, Duke is hurt. We need to be very careful with him. They opened the car door, and Duke limped out. He moved slowly, deliberately, clearly in pain with every step. But his tail wagged when he saw Sophie and Marcus. Sophie started crying immediately. She kneeled down carefully and put her arms around Duke's neck, her face buried in his fur. "You came home," she whispered. "You walked all the way home." Marcus didn't say anything. He just sat down next to Duke and put his hand on the dog's side, not quite believing what he was seeing. Jennifer put her arm around Michael. "He actually did it," she said. "He actually walked home. 90 miles, Michael said, on damaged paws through burned landscape in the heat for weeks. I don't know how." Over the next week, as Duke recovered at home, Michael found himself researching the phenomenon of dogs navigating long distances. He read scientific papers about canine homing behavior. He learned about the olfactory capabilities that allowed dogs to track scents across vast territories. He read stories of other dogs who'd made incredible journeys. But nothing quite explained what Duke had accomplished. Yes, dogs had strong homing instincts. Yes, they had remarkable sensory capabilities. But 90 miles, across unfamiliar terrain, with significant injuries, it seemed almost impossible. Michael worked with a dog behaviorist named Dr. Sarah Martinez, who specialized in trauma cases. Dr. Martinez explained that dogs were capable of remarkable things when they were bonded to their people. "Your dog didn't walk 90 miles because he understood the geography," Dr. Martinez said. "He walked 90 miles because, at some level, he was trying to find his person. The motivation overrode his pain, his fear, his exhaustion. He kept moving because the alternative, accepting that he was lost forever, was unacceptable to him." Michael thought about that explanation. He thought about how Duke had spent 7 years being part of the family, 7 years of being greeted with enthusiasm every time Michael came home, 7 years of being loved without condition. That love, apparently, had been powerful enough to push Duke across 90 miles of desert. The first month with Duke at home was challenging. The dog was anxious, jumpy at loud noises. He would startle awake from what seemed like nightmares, his body tense, his breathing rapid. He had occasional accidents in the house, which was unlike him. His body was still processing trauma, still in survival mode. Michael worked with Dr. Martinez to create a safe space for Duke to recover. They established a routine, consistent meal times, consistent walk times, a designated safe corner of the living room where Duke could retreat when he felt overwhelmed. They played soft music at night to mask outside sounds. They worked on desensitization, gradually exposing Duke to normal household sounds so he wouldn't startle. But Duke had also apparently forgotten some of his training. Commands that he'd known before the fire, sit, stay, come, seemed to have vanished from his memory. Dr. Martinez explained that this was normal, that the brain's prioritization system changes in traumatized animals. Fancy tricks weren't survival skills, so Duke's brain had essentially filed them away. Sophie and Marcus had to learn patience with their dog's trauma responses. When Duke would startle awake, they learned to give him space instead of crowding him. When he would snap at a noise out of fear, they learned it wasn't aggression. It was terror. They became his emotional support system, just as he'd been theirs. One evening, about 3 weeks after Duke came home, Michael found Sophie sitting on the back porch with the dog. Sophie had her arms around Duke, and she was talking softly to him. "I kept your drawing," Sophie was saying. "The one I made for the missing poster. I'm going to keep it forever. To remember that you came home. To remember that sometimes impossible things happen." Michael sat down beside them on the porch, and they sat in silence, watching the sun set over the backyard. Duke's head rested on Sophie's lap, his breathing steady now, his anxiety temporarily quieted. "He did something we thought wasn't possible," Michael said. "I don't know exactly how or why, but he did it." "Do you think he knew where he was going?" Sophie asked. "Do you think he was trying to get to us specifically?" "I think he was trying to get home," Michael said. "The specifics of how he did that, what guided him, it's something we'll probably never fully understand. Dogs don't think the way we do. They experience the world through smell and instinct and memory. He probably followed scents and paths that meant something to him, even if we can't identify them. He probably just kept moving, trusting that if he kept going, he'd find his way back to something that felt familiar." "That's kind of beautiful," Sophie said. "In a strange way." "It is," Michael agreed. "It's also a pretty good metaphor for what we're all doing right now. Moving forward, trusting that if we keep going, we'll find our way to something that feels like home." The new house was completed by January. It was structurally similar to the old one, but with updates based on what they'd learned from the fire. Better fire-resistant materials, a reinforced safe room on the first floor, improved ventilation, solar panels for emergency power. On the day they moved in, Michael let Duke explore the new house first. The dog walked through each room slowly, his paws still tender from their injuries, but mostly healed now. He sniffed each room carefully, processing. In the backyard, Duke stood in the grass and simply existed for a while. His body relaxed, his breathing steady. By January, Duke had improved significantly. His paws had healed enough that he could walk normally without apparent pain. His coat was growing back, no longer singed, but the same golden color it had always been. The dog regained the weight he'd lost and developed the calm confidence that comes with having survived something traumatic. But Duke still had anxiety issues. He would alert at the sound of helicopters. He would whine if he smelled smoke. On the 4th of July that year, when fireworks would go off, Duke would retreat to his safe corner and shake until they stopped. Dr. Martinez worked with the family to help Duke manage these responses. She taught them how to create safe spaces, how to respond to anxiety without reinforcing it, how to help Duke process fear in a healthy way. By the spring, Duke was almost fully recovered. His paws bore scars from the journey, but those scars had become part of him. He was the same dog he'd always been in most ways, but with the invisible weight of having survived something impossible. 1 year after the fire, the Chen family stood in their backyard, the new house behind them, the new grass slowly growing, the new life they'd built from destruction. Michael stood with Duke on the patio watching the sunset. The dog rested his head on Michael's lap, and Michael stroked the golden fur. "You taught us something," Michael said softly to the dog. "Something I needed to learn." Duke's tail thumped against the patio. "You taught us that you can survive terrible things, that you can find your way through impossible terrain, that home isn't just a location, it's where the people you love are, and if you're determined enough, you can find your way back to it." Michael looked back at the house. Inside, Jennifer was helping Sophie with homework. Marcus was doing a school project about animal behavior and had chosen Duke as his subject. The family was intact, was healing, was moving forward. "I'm sorry I had to leave you during the fire," Michael continued. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from it, but I'm grateful you came back. I'm grateful you didn't give up, even when giving up would have been so much easier." Duke's eyes closed and his breathing deepened. The dog had settled into the peace that comes from having found home, from having survived the unsurvivable, from having been loved so completely that it was worth walking 90 miles through a burned landscape to find. Michael thought about the journey Duke had taken. 90 miles, 145 kilometers. He thought about what had driven his dog across that distance. not understanding of geography or language, but pure, uncomplicated love, the desire to find his person, the determination to come home. It was not a miracle. It was not supernatural. It was not divine intervention. It was simply a dog who loved his family so much that he refused to accept being separated from them. It was resilience. It was the power of love. It was proof that sometimes, against all odds, things worked out, that sometimes lost things found their way home.